12th century was a dark period in time with brutal wars, diseases, and famine. However, in the midst of all the chaos, architects looked up. They didn't just build churches, they labored in creating beautiful reflections of heaven.
See how the masons have grown fat on our lawn? Reclaim these fields for Agatha!
This video will be broken up into three main pieces: context, what defines Gothic architecture, and a few examples of Gothic architecture. With that being said, let's begin with the historical context behind Gothic ideas. Gothic architecture began in medieval High Europe during the 12th century, but really took off and stayed from the 13th to 16th centuries. Most people of the era were used to living under heavy Romanesque roofs, which were so heavy most buildings had to sacrifice windows for walls to support the ceiling. This led to dark and very short buildings, which isn't what comes to mind when you think of a church. Other than Roman design, there was a common post and lintel, most commonly used by toddlers when playing with blocks. Post and lintel designs shared the same issues as the Romans. Heavy roofs meant small and windowless walls. Architects wanted to create a beautiful and bright church that made people look up towards the heavens. Churches that had plenty of beautiful windows depicting biblical figures that illuminated the building. And roughly in the year 1130, France built the Basilica of Saint Denis, the construction often considered the first Gothic church. So with that being said, what exactly is Gothic architecture? This can be broken into a few defining details. General layout: Gothic arches, height, spires, rib vaults, windows, including rosaries, and flying buttresses. The general layout of a cathedral is consistently a basic cross shape. Starting with the narthex, it is a west-facing entrance. It's the main entrance of a cathedral that most people will go through, and it always faces west because the east is the head of the cross, and the sun rises in the east, symbolizing God's light coming into the world. The narthex also symbolizes the separation between the earth and the heavens. Both to the north and the south of the narthex, there are two towers. The towers are pretty straightforward. They're very tall, symbolizing the connection between heaven and the church. They also hold bells, and they have passageways that lead to the gallery. The nave is the main seating area that covers a large majority of the cathedral. This is where most people sit during services. The aisles are to the outside of the seating areas. They are primarily for transportation and getting across to find a spot in the nave. Porches are any external portion of the cathedral. Usually you'll see these large flat areas in front of the entrances. Transepts are the arms of the cross. They each have an entrance facing north and south, and often chapels or maybe even altars may be in those areas. Between the nave and the two transepts is the crossing. It's an intersection between the entire cathedral. It's a large open space in the center, and usually it has a large dome or some similar shape above in the ceiling. The choir is the area between the apse and the crossing where the clergy and the choir sit. They often sing and praise for services here. The apse is a semicircular area that holds the main altar. It's often decorated with riches and murals. And the ambulatory is basically an aisle that surrounds the apse. Chevets are mini rooms that radiate from the ambulatory, and they do hold chapels. Moving on to key features, Gothic arches are made from cross-sections of two intersecting circles. The specific arch that it makes puts less weight on the walls and transfers it into lateral pressure. This is the defining feature that allows Gothic architecture to be so tall, which therefore allows lots of large windows. The large windows hold lots of decorations, and very often they have intricate rosaries and colors. The height of the cathedral is intentional not only for large windows, but for symbolism. Decorated rib vaults symbolize the beauty of heaven, and they often make people look up as if they were looking at heaven itself. Rib vaults are the decorated ceilings of the cathedral. Their unique design is caused by the Gothic arches. Spires are simply decoration to add more height, again, as if the church is trying to reach heaven. Buttresses hold the cathedral up. However, cathedrals have unique flying buttresses that are suspended in the air but also provide structural stability. If you look at the cross-section of a cathedral, you'll see two gaps, one above the ceiling of the aisle and another above the main ceiling. The ceiling above the aisle, that gap or space, is called a gallery. There are walkways between the two layers of the cathedral for people to explore. Now that we've covered all the architecture,